Welcome to the Singletary Center for the Arts. My name is Eric Munday, and I serve as the Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration here at the University of Kentucky. The university, in collaboration with TIAA-CREF, is excited to bring you NPR Presents Family Matters. To those in the audience who are UK employees, we thank you for your service and we thank you for what you do. We are committed to providing you for the support you need for your financial well-being, now and in retirement. Bringing this event to Lexington is an example of that commitment. We're also pleased that NPR was able to extend the invitation to members of the Lexington community, a community of which we're proud to be a part. Special thanks to WUKY and UK Human Resources for all their great work on this event. Now I'd like to introduce you to our hosts. NPR's Robert Smith, contributor to Planet Money, and David Greene, host of Morning Edition, two nationally distributed NPR programs. We hope you enjoy and participate in what will be an educational, thought-provoking, and also entertaining program. Please join me in welcoming Robert and David.
Sorry, Robert and I were back there watching previews for Scandal. We got a little distracted. We're really sorry about that. Good evening. I'm David Greene. I'm one of the hosts of Morning Edition on NPR, and I'm used to getting up and talking to mostly myself in a dark studio, having not slept very much. So this is wonderful to be with people. This is great.
And I'm Robert Smith. I'm a host and correspondent with Planet Money. And what David is not telling you is that he is an actual Kentucky colonel. I know. He went to school here, see?
That is a huge honor. I lived in Murray, Kentucky for 3 years, and so it's really fun to come back. Go Racers. Go Racers.
He's been asking, doesn't he get special privileges being a Kentucky colonel in the
Do
room?
I get special privileges? Is anyone else a Kentucky colonel in here? Oh, wow. This is awesome. Well, welcome to NPR Presents Family Matters, and this is an economic forum that is going to put you at the very center of the conversation. And it's sort of what Robert and I do every day. I mean, it's meeting people, it's listening to people, it's listening to your stories. We're listeners, it's not about us, it's about you. And that's really what we're going to be doing tonight.
Yeah, we're basically talking about your worries, what keeps you up at night. Maybe it is paying for college, maybe it's getting a home, maybe it's getting out of your home, maybe it's saving for retirement, or maybe you're just locked to CNBC for the last 3 days going like, where are stocks going, what is happening with the world? If this is keeping you awake at night, we want to hear your stories tonight and just talk sort of amongst ourselves about what's going on and what we can do about it.
And we thought we would start things off by hearing a couple stories that Robert and I have done to just get a feel for things. And Robert, a couple years ago for NPR's Planet Money, you did something kind of cruel. I remember hearing it. You pitted a grandmother and a grandson against each other and had them competing for the same job. What was that about? Yeah,
well, we found out this interesting statistic, and I don't know if it applies around here, but this is nationwide. There are more people over the age of 65 in the workforce, still working, than there are teenagers working. We think of the teenagers doing the fast food work. Retirees are taking those jobs. And so we decided to take a grandmother and a grandson and basically do a fake job interview. Now, the grandmother, she is a school teacher.
I don't think I'm going to ever leave the job world. I honestly don't think so. I don't really have an investment portfolio to fall back on. I am really grateful that I'm able to work, and I enjoy my job.
Her name is Alice. Her grandson's name is Max. And Max, he told us these stories of he would go into these places. He'd apply at fast food places, and he would look around, and he'd be thinking, some of these people should be retiring. Where is my job? Where is the opening for me? And he did not have much luck finding work.
I've applied to Quiznos, Wendy's, McDonald's, Arby's, Harris Teeter, Food Lion, Dollar General.
And he got none of them. He had to go back to school, sort of the story of a generation.
Yeah, no, that's a long list, and that gives you a sense of some of the struggles that people go through. Robert, we did a series of stories several years ago on Morning Edition. We called it Family Matters, which is a nice, catchy name, gives you a feeling for where we got the title for tonight. And we were focusing on the sandwich generation because this is a generation where people had the older generation in their family and a younger generation living with them in the same household, under the same roof. And this is a phenomenon that we were seeing increasingly in the United States. Families kind of closing ranks and coming together to take care of one another because people were living older. Families wanted to keep their loved ones in the house. And also because of economic struggles out there, it's better to sort of come together and live under one roof. It's easier to get by. And one of the stories we told was of a woman named Ida Christian. She was 89 years old at the time when I met her. She lived in Maryland. Dementia was really taking its toll, but her family was so determined to take care of her for themselves and to keep her out of a nursing home. And here's something I remember about her. She really loves to sing.
Sing your favorite song.
What is my favorite song?
Okay, I'm going to say the first couple words. It's your thing. Do what you want to do.
It's your thing. Do what you want to do.
She's really a magical woman. She was really frail when I met her. She needed a lot of help, and she was getting it from her granddaughter, Yolanda. Yolanda was in her mid-40s, and she made a really difficult decision to quit her job as a human resources manager at a nonprofit to take care of her grandma full-time. And then when she would leave for the day, her mother, Geneva, Ida's daughter, would come home from work, and she would take over. And Yolanda, she only planned to take just a year off from her profession, then she was going to go back to her career. But when I met her, it had already been 2 years, and things were really, really proving difficult.
I used to hear about people saying, we got to put our parents in a home. We can't deal with it anymore. And I used to think, oh, how cruel are you? But now I understand how people get to that last possible moment. It takes over your entire life.
Caring for her grandma, it
old.
did take over her entire life. She was feeling isolated from her friends. Her career was on hold, and she had burned through basically her entire savings at that point.
I'm 43 years old. I'm in the prime of my earning potential years. I've got to get back to work. If I'm going to have, a 401k, if I'm going to have anything to retire on, I've got to get back to work because I virtually have to start all over.
And it wasn't just her. The entire family was really pitching in to try and take care of Ida and her care. Ida's son, who was living in the house with her, decided to move into a rental so that the family could sell this house for the sake of his mom. There were just sacrifices all around, but I remember Ida Christian's daughter, Geneva, telling me everything they were doing, it was just all worth it to keep her mom at home.
Sometimes I just stop and look at my blessings. And sometimes I just stop and look at my mother. And she's still here. And she looks good. And she's healthy. She's well taken care of. And that means so much to me.
I'm sure that is a voice that many people in here can sort of relate to. Given a lot of the sacrifices that we all make to take care of family. And Ida still looks good. She's 91 years old. Her health has deteriorated more, but her family is still taking care of her. Her granddaughter has still not returned to work full time, but this is a family that has just closed ranks and in a tough economy has figured out ways to really take care of themselves.
This is one of the things that we do as NPR reporters, which is to hear people's stories, to hear what you have to say, to go into people's lives. So that's what we're going to actually do here tonight. We're going to have you talk about what's going on in your lives, and we're unqualified, believe me, to give financial advice.
Totally.
We ask questions, we don't answer questions, but luckily we have a great panel of experts here to answer your questions. First up, excuse me. First up is the editor of Kiplinger's Personal Finance magazine. She writes the Money Smart Kids column for Kiplinger, and she writes about smart finances for the entire family. She's been on NPR, TV. Please welcome Janet Bodner.
And our next panelist is a man who's been traveling with Robert and myself and doing some of these events. It's been great to get to know him. He's a wealth and business educator, the best-selling author of My Street Money, and someone who, whether you're rich, poor, where you come from, what your background is, he'll look you in the eye, sit down with you, treat you with respect, and give you advice that really, really means something. He's just a wonderful person and has a really interesting personal story. I hope we hear some of it tonight. Luis Barajas.
And finally, we always like to have somebody on the panel who can give us sort of the U.S. and global perspective on what's happening in people's lives. And Sarah Saddlemeyer, she's a senior associate with the Pew's Economic Mobility Project. And I asked her, well, what does that mean? And she goes, basically, she studies the American dream for a living. So please welcome Sarah Saddlemeyer.
Well, thank you, panel, for coming tonight. It's great to be sharing a stage with you, and we're excited to chat and hear some of the stories from all of you out there. Let's just start with one icebreaker up here. All of you are financial experts. Janet, I wonder if there's a financial concern that keeps you awake at night.
Well, nothing that totally keeps me awake at night. But,
That's good. That's good.
But something that a couple of things that I do think about at both ends of the age spectrum, because my husband is thinking about retiring. And so that's the big issue. You know, are we prepared? Do we have enough financial wherewithal to do this? And what I told him is, yeah, you can do this if you want to, but what are you going to do after you retire? You know, you better have a plan, because I don't want you floating around the house, you know, at loose ends.
So it's not about money. You just want to make sure he's not bothering you.
So, you know, you have to know where you're going. You have to plan this in advance. So that's one thing that we've been talking about. And at the other end of the age spectrum, my oldest child, I have 3 children. 2 of them are married. The oldest one, who's married, is now going to have a baby. He's going to be a father.
Nice.
And so he and his wife have been asking me and my husband for advice on setting up a 529 plan, a college savings plan for this new baby. But the funny thing is, they were asking for that advice for themselves and which one would be best if they live in the state of Maryland. But also they were asking about grandparents. What's the rule on grandparents setting up a 529 plan for their grandchildren? And I said, what's this grandparent stuff here that they're asking me for advice about? But I thought that was really interesting. So you have both age, you know, there's always something going on with your family. Family matters, no matter what your age is, there's something going on.
And so some empathy here. These are a lot of the very things that people have been writing on the cards tonight that they want to hear about, so that's good. Louis?
Well, I think the last session we had, you didn't say the finance part, so what kept me up at night, and I was telling that I was worried about losing some hair, but that's not happening.
I haven't seen any loss since I saw
I don't
last
think so.
time.
So let me just tell you, I think that right now, since the last conversation we've had, we've seen the Dow drop, like 1,200 points. And I'm really concerned because I'm not seeing a lot of I just sent out an email today to my clients, but they're not calling me. So either one, they trust me, or they're not paying attention. But my other concern is that people are getting scared and that they'll just move their money out of their investments into something safe, which they're not supposed to do. So I hope somebody has a question on that tonight. That's a concern.
And last but not least, Sarah?
So before I answer that, I do have to say that I grew up just a few states over in Georgia, and it's wonderful to be back in SEC country. I won't tell you which SEC team I root for, but don't hold that against me. So something that keeps me up at night is student loans. I think our research at Pew definitely shows that while student loans and the impact of student loans on family balance sheets is a relatively new phenomenon, it's something that's really impacting people, especially from Generation X and onwards. So really we're looking at people born 1965 to 1980 plus.
Now, we asked a lot of you when you came in to give us sort of what's keeping you up at night, your concerns. Most people, and we found this as we've gone to various cities, maybe it tells you something about the public radio audience, but most people wanted to talk about retirement. And in fact, when we last did this in Rochester, there were even some young people, we're talking like in their 20s, who wanted to talk about retirement. So it shows that the message is getting through, at least for somebody. But is this, as you look at the U.S. and sort of what people's main concerns are, is that what everyone is focused on now?
I kind of see what people are focused on as just keeping their jobs and living day to day. And that's the problem, is that they're thinking about retirement, but they're thinking about it when it's kind of too late, right? I mean, I can't get anybody in my office in their 30s to talk about retirement. It's more of their school loans. It's more of how am I going to be able to afford a house? And if I do save enough to buy a house, What happens if the economy turns sour again and I lose my job and I lose my house and I lose my credit? And that's what I've personally seen more of in the last couple of years.
People focusing not enough on retirement, focusing on
Not
sort of
enough on
day-to-day.
retirement. And they're not saving enough on retirement because they'll think that they'll get to it later, but there's not enough discretionary income that there used to be, right? So their incomes are not going up as fast, expenses are going up more, and they're using it for the day-to-day things.
But what do you tell people who feel like they can't even control the day-to-day? So how can they even think about retirement if they're sort of trying to just hit the mark and have enough to, support the family day in and day out?
Well, I think what needs to happen is we need to take a step back and get out of that I don't know, is it the right brain, the logical side, the left brain, right, the logical side, and get people to really talk about their dreams, their values, their hopes, their desires, and really to sit down and write a list of everything that's important to them, and then prioritize that, get some feelings, emotions tied to that, and then look at the numbers, and then scare the bejesus out of them that they're not going to get there. And now we have to pick and choose, right? And so, but those conversations are very difficult conversations to have unless you really are willing to put the time. The other thing is, again, I'm from Southern California, and in Southern California, everybody's just too busy. I mean, I have appointments all day long, and now I'm trying to figure out if I can have Skype conversations, or I'm having conversations on the phone. I'm talking to one person and the other spouse that can never get together. So it's also making time for those conversations.
I think too that a couple of things. What you just said about writing things down. We were talking earlier this evening about making lists and how if you make a list, it gets done, right? And if you don't make a list, it don't never get done. It's just not going to happen.
My wife would say that rule does not apply to me. Lists do not mean things get done.
You have to make your own list.
You need to hear this. You need to hear this. But it's really true that when you put something down in writing, it tends to be more real to you, and you can then focus on actually, getting it done. So if you write down that you need to start thinking about a retirement plan, then the hope is that the guilt will nag at you until you actually do something about it. But it's like a little psychological trick that you can play on yourself to try to organize your thoughts so that you can set priorities.
There's something else that's getting in the way. So I was showing these guys, I just got a new iPhone, right? And I was thinking about this because I was on Twitter last night, and I saw that David's got a brand new book. So I went to my Amazon, and I just ordered your book last night on Amazon.
Thank you.
So when you if you do go to LA, so you can sign the book for me. But I also went this morning, we're staying at the Hilton downtown. I walked across the street, and there's a Starbucks right in the corner. And I didn't pull out my wallet. I just pulled out my Starbucks app, and I just put it there, and I spent that money going that way. And I just think it's very easy to spend money without even thinking about it, right? So that's another problem that we have. So this is the devil.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Just listening
that's
to you
really
both, though,
true. That's true.
It sounds like mindset itself is important. Even if you don't have enough, even if you can't see dollars that you can put aside at that very moment, that if you can at least get to a point where you're in a certain mindset, you've won, I don't know, some small part of the battle. If you're thinking about the future, thinking about retirement, in that place.
You cannot save money. I don't care how much money you make. You cannot save money if you wait till the end of the month and then, put aside what you want for retirement or college or whatever, vacation or whatever. You got to do it off the top, at the beginning, automatically, without thinking. And if you make $30,000 or $300,000, it doesn't matter. You will spend everything that comes in if you don't take it off the top. So again, it's that mindset. If you get it taken care of, and then if you blow some money at Starbucks or whatever, at least you've got your savings set there. Some money is being set aside, and that's really critical. And I always I write a lot on the subject of kids and money, and this sometimes gets me into trouble because a lot of people think that this is a cashless society, right? So that kids should start using plastic early on so that they can get accustomed to this. But I always say you have to think like a kid. Plastic is not real money for a kid. Real cash is real cash. And so kids have to learn in an age-appropriate way. So learning to spend real money, having real money in their piggy bank or their wallet or their whatever they have in their house where they save money, and then, spending that money to buy the Lego set or whatever.
But that's the problem. And I think, Sarah, you can address it because the millennials I mean, my kids.
Are you assuming I'm a millennial?
No, I'm just saying, you were just talking about the people that you have, the millennial, or my kids, for example, Generation Y, whatever, they don't have any cash. I mean, remember we used to put quarters, like you park your car, and it's in LA, you put quarters in, or dimes and quarters and whatever. Now you put your credit card in LA.
Right. So before
And my kids never have cash. I mean, they don't have cash. It's
That's right.
it's their credit card or their iPhone app.
So one of my colleagues and I traveled across the U.S. and we had conversations with people to learn about what they were thinking and feeling about their finances. And neither of us are financial planners or advisors, but what we heard from people is along these lines, is that something that people really felt helped them save for retirement was the intergenerational transfer of financial literacy. And so if people had that from their parents, they felt like they were in a safe space. It was getting them into that mindset earlier. And if they didn't, they often felt like they were needing to catch up. And I think that was for us, it was a very profound realization.
And financial literacy is sort of what we're talking about tonight.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
and it's passing that on to the next generation.
Well, we had some people who asked us about their kids and what to do about their kids. One of them is Tammy Arnold. Tammy Arnold, are you here? Or did you write this and then it's escaped? Oh, there you are. I sometimes worry about that. People write their fears and go like, I need to go home. Like, I need to go take care of stuff. But if you'd like to come up to the microphone, if you could, and describe to us what you talked about here. So Tammy wrote, like many people, that she was concerned about retirement planning, but she also wrote specifically about her 24-year-old son. You do not have to give his name, but tell us about your 24-year-old son.
He's retired, basically.
If you could come a little closer to the microphone.
Sorry.
She said he's retired, basically. So tell us what the situation is with him. Is he living at home?
He's living at home. He did try college. We realized we were paying for him not to go to class. He was enjoying the social aspect. We've set rules and guidelines. Well, if you're living at home, you need to be working, you need to be doing this, that, and the other. You have chores, and he seems to like it there, and I don't know.
Uh-oh.
They don't want to leave.
I've tried to make it uncomfortable, but, you know.
You may have to make it more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So what is it you're looking for in particular? Is it advice for you or advice for him? Do you want us to speak to him?
Yeah, I would love that because he is not hearing it from me. You know, we've told him, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What kind of job do you want to do? Isn't that going to take either more education or training or something? But he is certain that he's going to find that job that really requires nothing but pays a lot.
Well, he does have a sweet gig. You seem like very nice parents and a nice place to live, of course.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of that going on. I don't know if it's here or back in LA or whatever, but really there's an issue that nobody talks about called financial boundaries, right? Sometimes when people are overspending, what they lack are boundaries. Sometimes there's something more systematic than that that's deeper, but at this point, I think that you and your husband really need to sit down, both of you, and work together and set some financial boundaries and do a little bit of tough financial love with your son. Because other than that, you're just making it too comfortable for him. And I honestly, the way you're going to find yourself in this world, and I think most of us have found when we were out there working, and that's when we saw what we liked and didn't like, and people gave us opportunities, right?
Yeah, I would say definitely. You know, I wasn't kidding when I said you have to make it less comfortable. You know, you got to give them an ultimatum, 6 months and out, that's it. Or 3 months and out, you know, whatever. But
like
you're
that.
gone, because you're being too nice, and he's obviously taking advantage of this. And of course, you're a mom, so you're going to want to be nice. But you know that this is not a good thing. It's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for him. So financial boundaries is a good way to put it.
But it's an excellent point that sometimes, like, getting a bad job is how you learn which direction you want to go in. And so in some ways, it's just like, yeah, what if I don't like that job? Well, maybe you should try it. Maybe it's good to not like a few jobs and say, like, oh, what I really like is to work with my hands or to do this kind of thing.
Are there numbers or research that suggests that maybe you could use for your son to sort of say, that there's research that if you, sort of stay at home until age X, it really hurts you kind of in the long run.
So many people would love us to do research that showed that. Our research does show that absolutely one of the most important drivers of upward mobility is education. And that children, even who start at the bottom of the income ladder and get a college education, 9 out of 10 of them are able to move out of the bottom as they grow, or as they grow up and hopefully leave their parents' houses. So I think just all of the data shows that this is, if you need to work first or whatever, but getting a college education is a really important piece of upward financial mobility and economic mobility.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming up, Tammy,
Thank
for being
you.
our first person. In fact, speaking of college, Jeff Markle wrote that he needs to save for his kids' college education. Jeff, are you here? Jeff, come on up. Tell us about your kids. If they're 24, then we're going to have a problem here. But it may be too late, but maybe they're young. Tell us about your kids.
Well, luckily they're not 24 yet, but I've got a 9th grader and a 6th grader. So looking back at how I grew up, I was very, very lucky that my parents were able to pay for my college outright. Got out, no student loans, no debt of any kind. And that has always been a desire of mine to give that to them. And without the crystal ball to know what scholarships or what other opportunities financially may be out there to help with that, it just is not going to be possible. So I want to be able to be in the best position where we can make college decisions based upon their desires and their plans, rather than just on who offers them the most money or what we can do the cheapest.
Well, first off, it's kind of a broad question. First thing is to sit down and think about your own personal finances. What do you think is realistic for you? The worst thing that can happen is to have your kids think that they can apply to any school they want to, and your dad will be able to finance it. So you have to introduce them to the real world. Will your own personal wherewithal allow them to go to a private school if they have to pay the entire tuition? Or are we talking about a state institution that they would be going to? What do you think is realistic for you and for your family financially? And then after you have some idea of that, take advantage of whatever college savings plan is available to you. I mentioned earlier 529 plans. We at Kiplinger really like 529 plans as a way to save for college because you get a lot of tax breaks and on the money going in. Sometimes if you're state, and I think Kentucky is one that gives, I shouldn't say this if I'm misstating it, but Kentucky might give you a tax break.
It does not.
It does not, okay. But you still get money on the money if you use the money coming out to pay for college. That the money grows tax deferred, and then if you use it to pay for college expenses, so you get a double tax break, if not a triple tax break. So that's something that is worth thinking about. But also remember that you don't have to finance 100% of college necessarily. So from your savings. So you can have a certain amount of money from your savings that will finance a percentage of your college. Current income at the time will help finance it. Borrowing can help you, but you have to be very judicious in borrowing because you don't want to get in over your head, nor do you want your kids to get in over their head. So there are other sources of income. But it's really important to know up front what you think is realistic for your family. And at the time, speaking of kids really should have skin in the game as well, and not just in the way of student loans, but just working summers at least to provide their spending money when they go off to college so that they're not depending on you for everything.
I think that another thing you need to be concerned about is who controls the money. Because, I've been doing planning for almost 30 years now, and back then there were no 529 plans, and everybody put their money in what are called UTMA accounts or UGMA accounts, and your kids now had control of the money when they turned 18 or 21, depends on the state you were in. Now, by 25, I was married to an attorney, had an MBA, had my own house, but my kids weren't there at the age of 24, 25, right? And so if I would have had a certain amount of money and they would have had control over those assets at the age of 18, I don't think they would have gone to college. I think they would have used it for, traveling, whatever, buying their cars. So the wonderful thing about 529 plans is you control who the beneficiaries and when they get it. And if they, just for whatever reason, let's say you got a kid who is a Bill Gates and never ends up graduating, doesn't even go to college because they're multi-billionaires, you can transfer that 529 plan, the beneficiary, to your other kid. And if for whatever reason, just they don't go to college, you can use it for yourself. You can transfer it for your grandchildren. So that's a wonderful thing also, knowing that you have control of those assets.
Is it tough finding the money to do it, or is it just organizing your planning for college?
Well, we've got 529s for both the kids, and we contribute to that monthly. But when we look at everything to contribute to, I have to get the minimum in the employee to get my employer match for my 401k. You have to get that. Put some money into the 529 account. You've got your mortgage. You've got your living expenses. And the younger one, she likes horses, so there's a lot of horseback riding expenses going on as well. So yeah, it's the balance of the allocation of current resources to your current needs and your future needs, whether it's short-term future being college, long-term future being retirement, and just trying to find that balance where you don't want to go into debt now, you don't want to go into debt later, and you don't want to burden your children with excessive debt when they go to school. So,
But it sounds like somebody's going to get debt at some point.
Well,
unless we get a full scholarship somewhere, yes.
Have you sat with a fee-only advisor, sat down to take a look at whether the amount of money you're putting in your 401k is going to get you there to retirement, whether the amount of money you're putting for the kids is going to get you there, or to see if it's only going to be at 50%? Because they say, right, they don't lend you money for retirement, they lend you money to go to school. And at the same time, your kids may come out of school with a burden of debt, but you may be a burden for them, because if you don't take care of yourself, at some point, we hope your kids will take care of you if you don't have money. So you have to tie all that emotional stuff also, because a lot of people feel really guilty some people never had their parents pay for their college, and they had to work 2 or 3 jobs to finish college. And then they feel guilty, and now they want to pay 100% for their kids because they don't want their kids to go through what they went through, but they're putting away no money for retirement. So you have to balance all that out. So it's important to just kind of get an objective, somebody who's sitting down with you, looking at the really broad picture, so you meet your goals.
And I was just going to say, don't beat yourself up. It sounds like you're on the right track. You're looking for balance, right? And you have to make choices, and everybody has a limited pot of money. Again, no matter how much you make, it's limited. So you have to divvy it up amongst all the things that are, all the priorities that you have. And so you have to set priorities. So that's really the first step. There's no silver bullet here, but just to take a look at what you have, the resources that you have, and how you might divide them is a really good step. And again, sometimes a third-party person that you can sit down with and say, hey, this is what we have, this is what we're doing, are we on the right track, can give you a lot of peace of mind. And they can take a lot of pressure off, too, if they have some recommendations for you.
Jeff, when you talk to your 9th grader, are you thinking 4-year college definitely, or are there sort of other options that?
Well, she's an academic, so yeah, it's going to be a 4-year college at least, though I'm only in it for 4 years. Anything else is great if we can. And if she continues on her same academic path, there's opportunities for some, significant scholarship money, though I think a lot of parents would say that about their kids as well. My kid's so smart. But, I can't hang my hat on that at that point. So, looking at a 4-year school, and we're not a family that pushes, you need an Ivy League or a private school, and state schools are good for some things, but others. We're really open to anything, and I think she will be too, depending upon what her interests are. So, I can't even narrow it down other than to say a 4-year degree, public, private,
Sure.
Ivy League. I don't know.
Because I asked, because when we've had parents on before, and Sarah, I'm curious, you said that education is so important in terms of mobility, but education is such a broad word, and it's not just 4-year degrees, right? I mean, this is a world where there are a lot, there are different kinds of vocational training, there are companies that are doing apprenticeships. I mean, it's some kind of education. It's not necessarily a 4-year degree. I mean, whatever education you can get, that proves really crucial, right?
Most of our research primarily looks at four-year degrees, but there has been other research that shows that community colleges and two-year programs are also valuable for mobility. And what I was going to say, because I feel like it's my role as a member of the research and policy community to ask more questions and not to actually be helpful with answers, is that I think I think that really a lot of families are finding that they're in uncharted territory with the concept of student loans. That, you know, only recently this has become a phenomenon. Really, in the last couple decades, people have started going to college in larger numbers. The price of college has skyrocketed. I'm sure that you have read and heard about that. And more people are needing to take out more and more loans to finance their education. And so I really think this is an important conversation for our nation to be having as well.
Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Before we get to retirement, I did want to say that a number of people had mentioned in an anonymous way asking about the stock market. And when I heard Jeff talking about, you know, having a ninth grader, you know, we've done these like sessions previously where the advice has been, yeah, you know, every month, you know, put your things away, stock it away, and when the stock market's going up, that's almost an easy thing to do. You're thinking like because you see your forms come in the mail and you're like, oh, I'm doing a little bit better every month. But at a time like this where no one should open their mail if it's coming from your retirement account, you've worked hard, you have the sort of discipline, let's just say, they've listened to your kind of advice, and they're going to see a huge hole either in their college savings or their retirement savings. So what do you do at a time like this? How do you keep people going?
Well, it's easy, actually.
Yeah,
It really
it
is. And the reason for that is that we know that, right, there's really kind of three major types of investments. There's cash type of investments, there's fixed, like the bonds, and then there's equity. The first two, you loan money out, one to a bank, one to a corporation or the government. The other one, you own, right? The equities you own. And to be able to achieve those long-term returns that you're used to, where your advisor tells you you're going to be getting an 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever number they're quoting you, rate of return, that's the ownership, and you're going to have to be comfortable with some volatility. And we go through these kind of, you know, type of years or type of months where we'll go down, you know, 5%, 10%. I mean, we've been like the last 5 years, just like you said, every time you open up your account, it's doing well. So you have to understand that that's how the game is played if you want to beat inflation. What you have to do, though, is if you're really uncomfortable, and if today were the last day of October and you'd be getting your statement that in the next couple of days, you might be concerned. We'll see how the rest of this month ends up. But what needs to happen is you need to always go back to square one. What am I investing my money for? What's the goal? What's the time horizon? What's my risk tolerance? And I just did an interview when they said, well, what about the people who are going to be retiring this year? I said, well, what about them? Are they going to be taking all their money out? They're not. People are living longer and longer. That's one of the problems that we have about retirement. Can I share a quick story? I started in this industry 30 years ago. I sat down in front of a manager. It was for IDS American Express, and he looked at me and with serious eyes, and he said, Louis, people are going to retire at age 65. Most men will retire at age 65 is what he told me, and they'll be dead by 72. You need to make that money last 7 years. That was 30 years ago. I swear to you, that's a God's honest true story. I laugh at that. I sit down in front of, let's say, one of my staff, and I said, look, people are still going to retire around age 65, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit earlier, but you're going to have to make that money last until age 95, right? Because the problem is they're keeping us alive longer and longer with all the biotechnology and all the medication. So now we got a whole lifespan. And we've got to get our money working for us. And so the problem is now I'm more concerned about if somebody, I see the audience, if you're in your mid-50s, you should be thinking about long-term care insurance, stuff that you can't control. We can't control the economy. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on that we'll never be able to control, but we can't control how much we're contributing. We can't control whether we have the right time horizon. We can't control whether we have the right asset allocation in our portfolio. And those are things that you can control, and that's all you can focus on and not worry about anything else. Am I 100% sure that the stock market will be higher in the next 5 years? Yeah, I'm like 99.9% certain. In the next 15 years, for sure. It will be much higher than it is right now. But the point is, always go back down to basics and not let fear, the emotions of fear or greed take over.
Right, and if you have an automatic plan, if you have a plan that's set up that you're comfortable with, Stuff like this will happen this week and you won't even notice. At our magazine, believe it or not, at Kiplinger's, we are now working on our January economic and investment outlook. Can you imagine doing that now, in the month of October, in a week like we've just had? And we're thinking about what we're going to say about 2015. And that concerns us on a professional basis. But for me personally, I say, oh, that's really interesting. Gee, the market was up, down 490 points at the opening. It was down 200 points. It's been going up and down. But I feel good about what I have, where I have my 401k money. And I'm probably more conservative than some other people would be, but I can sleep at night with the money that I have in savings. And so if you can do that, then the short-term volatility is much less, affecting. It's not going to really make you nervous or make you do crazy things like pull your money out altogether, because then what are you going to do?
So last thing, if like tonight, we'll go out after, maybe share a beer or something, what would I be telling you, not telling the audience? So I'm just going to tell you guys right now while we're having a beer, and not tell them, that if you've moved money out of the market because you were scared of the recession and never got back in, this might be the time to get back in. Okay? This is sometimes, but don't tell anybody.
Don't.
But the point is that if you've had money that you had targeted for long term, 5, 7 years or longer, and because you never was the right time, and then you missed it, and then it went too high, and then you got scared because you think it's going to go back down. Well, guess what? It's kind of gone back down. So there's nothing wrong with coming back in right now.
You want to talk about debt?
Let's talk about debt.
Let's talk about debt. This is a subject that has come up when we've been in some of these events, and it gets, it's almost gotten
sexy.
Violent.
Sexy,
It gets
right?
sexy.
Sexy.
Yeah. Michelle Singletary is, she writes a column for the Washington Post, and she is really anti-debt. And at our last event, there was a guy who had no debt, and I think she was kind of flirting with him.
She was definitely flirting with him.
She definitely was.
And so it's unfortunate she couldn't join us tonight. She often comes out here with us because it is a sight to behold. If you stand here and you say, "Oh yeah, I put a trip to Europe on my credit card," she will just tear you down. And because she is of the zero debt school. That debt is
evil.
Is evil.
Is evil.
She just says it's evil for everything from going to college to funding a home to retirement, the whole thing. No debt.
We got a card here from Andrea talking about that. Andrea, are you here? Yes? Oh, yeah. Do you want to come on down? Andrea wrote, what financial concerns keep you up at night? Credit card debt, student loan debt, medical expenses, so a lot to talk about. And someone has to channel Michelle and
Not me.
not you.
Well, I'll
so Andrea,
say.
tell me what's on your mind when it comes to debt.
Well, probably aging with a chronic illness the most. Student loan debt will be taken care of. But aging with a chronic illness, because that's like your child. But that's never going to go away. And how does one, I have second savings accounts, like a Christmas club, that I put away for medical emergencies, like the Flex Fund. I treat it like my insurance Flex Fund, but I do it myself. So I plan like that, but in the long term, how do you plan for something like that?
And you don't have to reveal too much, but you have an illness that you're worried about the expenses could just build over time, and how to avoid going to debt to treat it.
Exactly.
Any advice for Andrea?
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe what you need is some advice. Like, I'm not really sure, just from what you've said, what your concern is. Do you worry that you don't have enough insurance? Do you worry that you may have additional expenses that insurance won't cover? Are you worried about providing long-term care, for yourself? I mean, those are different kinds of issues. And I think maybe what you need is to, and maybe you already have in your own mind, but to narrow down exactly what your main concern is and then focus on that. And it may help to see a financial planner or someone who specializes in long-term planning for chronic illnesses, which I'm sure some people do,
that's
right?
exactly what I was going to say. And the same thing is for a lot of people, we don't know, right? I don't know if I will have an illness. I don't plan for that. I don't sit there when I'm sitting, we know that divorce in America is over 52%. But when I'm sitting with a couple, I say, well, let's plan for your divorce. But you know that if you've got an illness, you know already what's coming. And so right now, I think, just like you said, that it would really behoove you to sit with someone who's a specialist to take a look at whether, if you do not have enough money, if for some reason you're not going to have enough money, what kind of resources are available. And sometimes, I hate to say this, but sometimes how you have your assets allocated make a big difference whether you get help from someone, whether it's the state, the county, whatever, as compared to how you would have your assets, whether you would gift them to your children or what, I don't know. So I think that right now it really makes sense to sit down with somebody and take a look at your entire, your balance sheet, your net worth statement, take a look at what you have and then what other costs, and then put that all together and take a look at the medical stuff. Because it would really be terrible for me to give you some advice and not seek professional help.
It sounds like, though, you feel like other debt you have sort of a plan, I mean, under control, which is really nice to hear.
Well, it's there. It needs to be addressed, and there's no getting around it. It's just, you just have to do it.
But it's the unpredictable part of the illness that really worries you. It's the idea that something could happen in 5, 10, 15, 20 years that just requires a whole lot of money suddenly.
Exactly.
Are
And
there ways to-
without good insurance, it could be astronomical. But right now I have good insurance, and when I retire is what I'm concerned with, long range versus short range, because what's going to happen in retirement.
Are there things to do to protect against sort of the unpredictable medical events? I mean,
Well, they are, but the problem is that, for example, if she's already, most of the time, between the ages of like 55 and 64, I'm sitting down with the clients, and again, I don't sell any product, just so you know, but I'm talking to them about getting maybe long-term care insurance. We're talking about not what's possible, but what's probable. And sometimes with families, I don't deal with I have some wealthy clients, but I don't have very wealthy clients. And if I see that the gentleman is 7 to 10 years, they're both in good health, and he's older and she's younger, and I know that if he gets ill, she'll probably take care of him, but maybe he might not take care of her. We're trying to figure out maybe we can get a long-term care policy on her if we can't afford it, right? We're going on probability, not what's possible. So there are a lot of things that you can do. Some people have cash value policies, or some people have some life insurance policies that actually, if you get really ill, you got cancer, you can actually use some of the proceeds before you die, and you can get some of that money there. So again, I don't know that the detail for, there are other people who have relatives here who might be in the same situation, but sticking your head in the dirt or in the sand isn't going to help. You really need to sit down, and you can plan for it. You can plan for it.
Andrew, any other questions that you have for this group?
One, when someone has a chronic illness and you want to be prepared for financial considerations, would you suggest a power of attorney?
Yeah, that's the estate plan. So let's just quickly talk about what you just mentioned. So one of the things that when people talk about, I talk about doing a trust or a will. It's never about just death. It's also when you're doing your estate plan, you're going to be doing an advanced healthcare directive. You're also going to do a durable power of attorney, durable financial power of attorney, because there might be a point where you will not be able to make decisions for yourself. And those are things that are being done for you while you're alive, not after you've passed away. And so that's the other aspect, that when you sit down with a comprehensive planner, they're going to take a look at the estate side, the insurance, the cash flow, how you've held your assets. Those are important things, absolutely.
Thank you.
Andrew, thank you for coming up and sharing this with us.
So we want to take a few more retirement questions, and it's interesting. We've had a lot of people who have talked when we've done these events about supporting their family members and having to plan for multiple generations. We had one person here, Pat Whitlow. Are you in the audience still? Pat, where are you? It's hard for us to see. Pat, come on down to this microphone over here. Pat Whitlow says that she is single, no children, and so she has to make sure that she can take care of herself in retirement, which is sort of an interesting situation, because you realize how much we rely on family, that is the sort of insurance we never talk about, right? That we can spread risks and financial burdens among family members. But if you want to sort of describe your situation to us.
I know people in this room, you know.
Well, why don't we ask someone else about you?
Would you like us to describe you? No.
So I should have given another name. That's what my sister said. But yeah, so I am not married and I don't have any children, and I'm fortunate to be employed here, and so I've always had a job and I've saved. I'm fairly conservative, but the reality is I will be taking care of myself entirely, all of my financial needs. And so I just wonder if there are special strategies for people in that position.
Well, I think in your position, for sure, long-term care insurance is something that, Kiplinger recommends that, especially for single women, because statistically, well, for any woman, because statistically women tend to live longer. Right. I always say, whenever I don't know whether you find this true in your practice, but when I've talked to groups about long-term care insurance, men, and this includes my own spouse, the men aren't really very eager to buy this because they figure their wives are their long-term care insurance, right?
That's
right. The wives are going to take care of them, right?
Yeah.
But it's the wife who's going to be there potentially in the nursing home, God forbid, in assisted living, that sort of thing, just because statistically that's what happens. So I think it's really important, certainly for single women and even married women, if your spouse doesn't want to do this, you should beat on them to do it. But, if you're concerned about this, then that's something you should look into, for sure.
I do have that.
Quickly on long-term care, though, the thing is that if you don't have any money and you're pretty poor, usually, like, for example, I come from California,
Yeah.
There's Medi-Cal, and they'll take care of you. And now you don't even go to a long-term care facility. There's not a lot of money. They send somebody to your house. They're gonna dress you, bathe you, whatever, at your home. But even then, it's costing, back in California, it's costing like $6,000 to $7,000 a month for that. And it's really expensive.
Right.
So the problem is the people who get hurt the hardest are the middle class. The people who save just enough money. They've got in their retirement $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, where in 4 years of long-term care, you could wipe out all your retirement savings, literally. So that's why I just want to make sure. If you're really rich, you can pretty much be self-insured. You don't need it. But if you're kind of that person who's just saved enough, be careful. So that's why that's really important to take a look at. The other thing, again, is I go back to getting an estate plan done, because sometimes people, if you don't, again, you may have sisters and nieces and nephews. People also want to do sometimes, they have assets. They've had money in certain brokerage accounts, and they've been investing in stocks or build a portfolio. They can donate money to charity and not have to pay taxes on that. They basically get a tax break. And so there's ways to save money on taxes if you want to gift some of your money away. So there's a lot of, I think on the estate planning side, you also want to get that taken care of as well.
Okay. Sarah, have you looked into anything about sort of there are more single people are waiting longer until they get married, the sort of changing nature of family structures, smaller families, and how that affects finances? Or?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing our research, we primarily look at parent generation and then their adult children. And so we're able to make this comparison over time and across generations. And so over the last generation, family sizes have been smaller, which means that income tends to go farther, right? So if we adjust your income for family size, each person in your family has more of that income. But we're not able to do that with wealth because we sort of don't understand, and there are many complicated ways that wealth is shared among families. So I think this is something that we heard a lot in our focus groups around the country, and it's something that we're certainly thinking about. It's not just about, obviously, the statistics, but it's about really thinking about policy and research based on people's feelings and behaviors and sort of meshing that with data. So I think this is something that many people are thinking about. I don't know, that makes you feel better.
I'll give you a demographic that I never used to see. So now what I see is people are waiting much longer. Like in my office, I see new couples coming in. They've recently got married. They're all in their mid-30s. Before, it used to be in their mid-20s. And it's my money, her money, and our money. And it used to be before just one pot. And it's very difficult to do planning this day and age when everybody's kind of like, this is mine, that's his, and they don't share, and they kind of put money in, and it becomes very problematic to do planning these days sometimes when it's worked that way. Sometimes it's better to just kind of work together as a team, see what's going on moving forward, and have shared values and shared goals. But I'm finding that more and more difficult, actually.
And something else that we've seen, we did some work on sort of women's contribution to family income and to family mobility. And we've seen, especially with the influx of women into the labor market and the increase in families headed by single females, that women's earnings and the earnings of single women especially are incredibly important to family mobility. I think single women contribute 80% plus of their own family's income. And so just sort of thinking about planning and doing research. I mean, I'm speaking from a research perspective, but thinking about the ramifications going forward of we think about it in terms of gender pay equity and in terms of really how much in either a married couple or an unmarried couple or as a single person, how women's earnings are really playing into family mobility.
And we'll be talking about this a lot more because I think traditionally people haven't sat down to think about where they are financially and make plans until they're married. Like that was part of what you did, right? You found a home, you sat down, you sort of decided these sort of things. But you look at the situation where people are waiting 10, 15 years that they need to be investing, they need to make these decisions as single people. And then you also, I sort of, I feel for you because, there is that sort of inherent insurance in being married. One of you can lose a job and you have another person there. And so, you having to be sort of much more careful in terms of insurance and protecting yourself and that sort of thing.
Has the American dream changed? I mean, there are so many people who are single. There are so many people who are not homeowners anymore. I mean, it feels like sort of this word, the American dream, is very different than 30, 40 years ago.
I mean, I think people today are potentially slightly more pessimistic about their own financial situation, but in our focus groups, and Pew has conducted several polls over the last couple years, we see that people are incredibly optimistic about the fact that their children, or children in general, will do better than their parents or than themselves. And so I think the current economic situation has definitely taken a toll on individuals when you're sitting down and thinking about your own finances, but that, to me, and what we find is the American dream, the idea that your children will do better than you, is still something that's very alive and that people are very optimistic about. And I think that makes me happy.
I'd like to ask how many people here who have children think that their kids are not going to do as good as they are because of the way the economy is in the future. Anybody? I mean, I see that. I mean, I went back and saw my grandparents, my parents, myself, and then now I say, I don't know if my kids are going to do as well. And I see that a lot these days, that it's just a different reality that kids are facing. So I was research. I was doing research. I don't think the two people raised their hands.
It's not scientific.
I feel like my optimism needs to be counterbalanced by pessimism.
By my pessimism, okay.
You've a sampling of pessimists who are coming here.
We need to,
Well, let's dig a little into the nitty-gritty of retirement, because, Louis, I was interested in you saying that retirement has to last longer because we're living longer. And this is something that's on the mind of Michael Braun. Are you in here, Michael? Yes?
Yes.
Michael wrote that the concern that keeps him up at night, making retirement funds last as long as I need them to last, which sounds
How long are you going to live?
Yeah, right. It's easy.
Put on the record.
Into my 90s.
Into your 90s, well
Yes.
into your 90s.
Sounds like a good plan.
Honestly, I had to make that up because we're fine. We have enough money that will last long enough at withdrawing 4% and
You're in
to
good
invest
Then
it
are
with
you
T. Rowe
concerned you're not going to
Price
spend it?
and-
You can't spend it?
What was that?
Is your concern that you will not be able to spend it?
No, we're spending it fine.
Okay.
Traveling.
What are you spending it on?
No
worries.
Yeah.
So nothing
Thanks.
keeps you sleep like a baby.
I do.
All right.
But let me, I do want to come back to something, though.
Yeah.
Because I think, what I'm finding with my friends, we don't have any children, which is another
Oh, well,
reason
that's
probably.
the
See, there you go.
secret.
There you go.
No kids.
If you'd like to have a 24-year-old live with you,
Yes.
Tammy knows someone who could come on over, sure you have a lovely extra bedroom.
We have friends whose children are now, let's say, post college. And I mean, they are like, they have gone through law school. They have gone through architectural school. They have gotten PhDs in anthropology, and I can go on and on. Law, I mean, you know, we have this great law school here at UK, but you know, the average income that they're going to have when they come out is maybe $60,000 because we have such an abundance of lawyers. And so what we're finding now, I think, with our friends is that, I mean, these kids that went out there and got that great education in professions that you think, you know, at least in the old days, used to provide a pretty good living. They don't anymore. I've got 2 friends who have children who are PhD, postdoc medical researchers, and they are doing their postdocs and, you know, barely scraping by at, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 a year. And, you know, the reality is there are no postdoc. I mean, after they're done doing that, there's really nothing to go on to, particularly in research programs at the universities, because they're kind of like little pyramid schemes at this point. I think it has really changed, even in terms of, you know, those really good education. I mean, I don't think education is just the answer
Well,
anymore.
you've done my research for my pessimism.
I was just going to say, we went from optimism
I mean,
to
I'm not a Pew, but
get these wonderful degrees and
Everything's
go into
great.
fields like
Everything's
medicine and law, and
great.
they don't go anywhere. Is this something we're seeing in the country?
You know, let me just tell you, the world is changing, and when you're giving advice to and you're mentoring the younger generation, it's really important to look at the broad picture and and have a global view of where the economy's at. My son studied graphic design. Okay, he got his degree in graphic design. Well, I needed a new logo about 6 months ago, and what I did is I went on an app and I ordered it through Canada, and for $50, I got 5 graphic designers who gave me 5 designs. I got to pick the top 2. I got to tweak those 2, send it back. Then they competed against each other, sent it back, and then I got to pick one and then make the final changes on it. And it was all for $50.
Boy, keeping your son in business, that's good. That's good.
Right? Right? So my son is saying, like, what do? I said, you better learn finances really quickly. Right? I mean, even in my world. So I'm a fee-only advisor now, so I don't earn any commissions on it. But in my world, the way most advisors were making their money, it was commission. Now commission's pretty much gone away. Well, there are people who are charging a fee to manage assets. That's being commoditized by these robo-advisors, by these computer models that'll do it for you for like pennies on the dollar. What are these advisors going to do? We're making $200,000-300,000 a year. I got a friend who's making $500,000 a year. Who's now this year is going to make maybe about $180,000. That's not too shabby, but he's not making $500,000 anymore because he's got all these other guys like me not charging, just charging a flat fee. The world is changing. And so I go back to, we need to take a look at, and one of the, I guess, studies you'll see is that people aren't changing jobs anymore 6-7 times in a lifetime. They're changing careers. They're going, I mean, you know, David said he's going to be doing, what were you going to do next week? You're going to do a new career, right? You're no longer doing radio. You're going to be driving a train or something in Russia.
Yeah, I would love that, yeah.
So, but it's so I go back to, we have to mentor and guide also and say, look, this is the world it was before, but now we need to get our kids to think from a global perspective and kind of try to see the future out and you know, look at the future. Otherwise,
what does
they're going to
global
suffer.
perspective mean? I mean, like, don't go to law school or medical school anymore? Like,
You know, you don't go to law school if you don't love law. If you were born to do law, you will do it for free. And if you can make $50,000 a year or $75,000 a year or make as much as a teacher does, but you love it, then you're going to be happy. But in the past, there were a lot of lawyers that were doing it just for the money, and I was there doing planning for them to get out of their career because they had ulcers. I mean, they couldn't sleep at night. They hated their jobs. People who were going, the old doctors are constantly complaining that they're working, they're not making less because I see their finances, but they're working harder for the money that they're making. But the new young doctors aren't making that much money anymore. You better love what you're doing. You better have a passion. You better be really good at it because otherwise, you know, it's just going to be hard. Otherwise, we're just going to have to be earning wages of what like the people at NPR earn or something.
Michael, I
And
wonder
if you don't love anything, petroleum engineering
Right. Well, yeah,
is your best, highest paid
you laugh, but
major.
That's true. Just to build on what Louis said, again, this doesn't help your friends' kids who are already out there, but it's really important, and we started with this at the beginning. Maybe going to college in the sense of four-year college isn't what you want to do. Maybe you want to, go into a trade. Maybe you want to start in a two-year school and then transfer to a four-year school. But you need to look into the fields that, as near as we can figure, are going to be growing fields in the future. And there's no, again, there are no guarantees, but you have to be smart about, your planning, smarter maybe now than you used to be. And, you're right, people went to law school because they couldn't figure out anything else to do. Or they went to grad school because they couldn't get a job and they didn't really know what they wanted to do. And now, not only are they going to grad school or going to law school because they're not really sure what they want to do, they're taking on a lot of debt to do it. I mean, the last thing you want to do is take on $200,000 worth of law school debt if all you're going to get is a $50,000 job when you graduate. That's not a smart financial decision.
And not like what you're doing. If you didn't
Right,
go into
exactly.
loving
And
law,
then you want to get out of it. So then you owe all this money and you're in a job that you don't even like. So we're writing a story next month about a former lawyer from Atlanta who's opened a clothing store. He's leaving the law and he's opening a clothing store because he really hated it. So, I think that, young people going forward need to think about where they want to be, what they want to do, to the best of our ability to be able to predict those sorts of things.
Michael, you seem pretty confident in the decisions you've made about retirement, but besides not having children, with Janet was chuckling over here saying that was the key to your financial security right now. What do you think you did right that has you in a really good spot right now that we could all learn from?
Well, when I got my first job, real job, when I was about 25, and that's just when 401ks, 403bs came along, and all of a sudden I heard, well, I was going to get this 403b money, and then it was with T. Rowe Price, and I needed to invest it. And I went, wow, I don't know anything about that. So I spent the next 2 years reading financial information and taking, not Kiplinger, but Money magazine, just getting the basic chops down. And then we just put it on automatic. We took the money out right away, and we didn't just take out the money that, was required for our match. We put as much away as we could besides. And 30 years later, it was fine. It all worked.
Well, congratulations for making really good decisions. And thanks for sharing with it.
Well, we are running out of time. Is there any other burning questions? Anything else you need help with, other than going back in time and not having kids and spending all your money on yourself until you're, what was it, 97? Is that what we're headed for?
There's not one more burning question out there? There's got to be
That's
one
free
more.
advice. I'm not even charging a bourbon for it or anything.
Although we will take a bourbon later. That's a great, yeah. Let me repeat that. That's how do you choose a financial planner? And this gentleman here says he feels like sometimes he can't afford one.
Right, well, you can afford one. The wonderful thing is that the financial planning industry is evolving into what I think is going to be true financial planning. There are a couple organizations that I would recommend to you. One would be NAPFA, to find an advisor. The other one would be somewhere called the Garrett Planning Network, in which there are financial planners who do not earn commissions, do not get referral fees, and they will charge you by the hour. I don't do that. I'm a NAPFA advisor, and I work with clients very comprehensive. I just don't believe in a little piece, but it'll help you. And there's nothing wonderful than sitting in front of someone who has years of experience beyond knowing the numbers, but who's also is wonderful at dealing with the behavioral aspect of money and kind of getting to know you and giving you honest, objective advice and guiding you to where you need to be. And sometimes you just need to be tweaked. And for some clients, they're so busy, they need to have somebody who's kind of doing all their stuff for them.
Sometimes we worry that if you go to a financial planner, they're going to tell you it's worse than you think. There's almost that fear, but I suppose do you ever tell people don't worry as much. Like, calm down.
No, I tell them. So hold on, and let me get you through the alphabet soup. Let me get you through the alphabet soup because it's really important. So there's this thing that like the golden initials behind designation is a certified financial planner. But just know that certified financial planners cannot give investment advice. If you want investment advice, you need someone who is a registered investment advisor. Okay, so people don't understand that. And so you're better off finding someone who's a CFP and a registered investment advisor, okay? Because they can give you advice not just on what they sell. So for example, if I work for a brokerage firm and I have a Series 7 or a license, I can really kind of only give you advice about the stuff that I'm selling you. And if I'm not an investment advisor, I cannot give you advice about the accounts that you have at the bank and the stuff you have with the credit union, the stuff that you have at your wife's T. Rowe Price account. You need an investment advisor. They must be registered. Certified financial planner, CFP. Now that doesn't mean that the people who have those things are going to be great people. So find out also how they're compensated, okay? So find out how they're compensated. Ideally, you'd like to go with someone who's going to charge you, a fee, a flat fee for giving you advice, not to sell your product. And so the NAFA people take an oath that they cannot, and actually you have to show them like a tax return and also turn in a financial plan to make sure that, you know what you're doing. And you can find them on the web. I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah. We, at Kiplinger, NAPFA, we recommend people go to NAPFA. We also recommend the Garrett Planning Network. We think those are really good. And then we just did an interview
ACP? The Alliance for Comprehensive Planners.
Oh, right, yes, that's another one. But last month, we did an interview with a man and gentleman in the planning industry who says, talk about evolving. His theory, and he was writing in a professional journal, which is where we found him, is that, for younger people, millennials in particular, who don't have a lot of money, they're talking about going on a retainer basis. So maybe you pay... And you don't have to be a millennial to do this, but you pay like $100 a month roughly, say, something like that, to have a financial planner on retainer so that you can call, and they're not even face to face, they're texting, and they're doing stuff like that, doing it on their phones rather than face to face meetings. But, this is the way this gentleman thinks that the industry may evolve in order to encompass more people, to give more advice that people can afford. But, I think that's a really good idea.
I'll also ask how much experience they have. And the reason for that is I always encourage, my daughter's starting in the industry in January. She's only 24. But I wouldn't hire my daughter, because she's too young and she's never been through downturns. And that kind of experience, when you have a planner, that's the person who's going to hold your hand and say, look, I've been through this 10 times and this is what might happen and whatever. So you need somebody who can kind of guide you. Now, that doesn't mean that my daughter's not going to be doing work for our clients, but as she gets more experience and gets into I probably won't have her sit in front of a client for at least 5 years until I feel comfortable that she's got that experience behind her.
We have like about 4 minutes left. I'm going to put you all on the spot with a very broad question. As we've been listening tonight, what is one thing that you feel like we could all do or think about that's really easy, but that would make a huge difference in terms of our financial security?
Well, I would say, I would go back to what I said earlier on, and other folks here said as well, and that is to do things automatically. Don't, write down your priorities, or, do whatever you need to do to figure out what you want to do, where you want to get to, and then do it automatically. And I think, again, do it step by step. Don't try to do it all at once. Take it one step at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. Think about, as you started off with tonight, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night, and start with that. And take one step to take care of that. If it's paying off debt, maybe you go to see a debt counselor and figure out how to get the debt paid off. If it's your student loans, figure out if you're in the best repayment plan. If it's not saving enough for retirement, bump up your contributions with your employer. And if you haven't signed up yet, do it tomorrow. What's the one thing that keeps you up at night? Take care of that and make it as automatic as possible.
I like it. Louis?
God, I'm going to, ditto. Let me just tell you, I have a very interesting client base. I've got some really, really famous people who are making a ton of money, but the majority of my clients are blue-collar immigrant people who are putting money in a retirement plan, who've taken money from their from their payroll, put into their 401k. They didn't even tell me what they have, and don't even know what investments they selected. They see me when they're retiring, and they all have around $700,000. I've got one lady who is handing me next week. We're rolling over into an IRA over $1 million, and she has a 6th grade education. And it is time, and it is putting money away, but it has to be taken out automatically, or you're going to spend it. We're just creatures of habit, because I used to think, I had clients who tell me, wow, when I made $50,000, I used to say, well, when I have $75,000, I'm going to be rich. When I have $100,000, I'm going to be rich. When I make then they made $100,000. They said, when I make $150,000, and they're still just as broke when they were making $50,000. We just tend to spend more. We tend to move to a nicer neighborhood, drive nicer cars, go to nicer shops. So ditto, that's what I've seen.
And Sarah, you don't give advice, but I mean, is there something that sort of, if we just thought about it more often, it might make a big difference?
Yeah, so I'm going to say something a little bit pessimistic, so I want...
Oh, no.
Great.
That's
Let's
my
just
job.
go out on that note.
Everyone
We're all
brace
going to leave
yourselves.
here feeling great. That's good.
Our research shows that a majority of Americans don't have more than a month or two of liquid assets, especially something like extremely liquid, like a savings account, to cover expenses in case something happens. And so our research also shows that economic mobility and economic security go hand in hand. So you can think about if you're upwardly economically mobile and you're able to save some of that money, like short-term savings, that will be there both as a cushion in case something happens, in case you lose your job or there's an illness, but that can also be invested in mobility-enhancing endeavors. So for example, you could use that money to go to college, or you could use that money to fix your car if it breaks down, so you can go to work and don't miss income for that day. And so it's sort of this virtuous cycle of upward economic mobility allows you to accumulate assets and wealth, which then allows you to be further upwardly economically mobile. So just sort of thinking about that as you're planning, I think we think is really important.
That time flew.
Yeah, already 8:30. Wow.
Yeah, we're out of time. And let's first say a huge thank you to our panelists. Sarah Saddlemeyer of the Pew Charitable Trust, financial educator Luis Barajas, he's the author of My Street Money, and Kiplinger's Personal Finance Magazine editor and columnist Janet Bodner, author of Raising Money, Smart Kids. Thanks to the three of you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for showing up today.
It's our pleasure.
My co-host is the Honorable Colonel David Greene.
Wow.
Only in this audience can we address you that way. I'm Robert Smith, but we wanted to thank you so much for coming out, and thanks for sharing your stories. We put you on the spot, but it was great to get to know you and to hear your stories and what you're going through. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, thank you.